Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has given us grace to all of us, infinite blessing, so we should be grateful because by being grateful for the favors from God, we will always not feel lacking. And remember that praise belongs only to God who deserves to be praised because we don't have any power except with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat and greetings do not forget. Let us pray to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to his family, friends, and may each us all. Amin. My beloved woman in the whole world, in essence, we are born into this world to be nothing but God's servants, but good servants. The role of woman is very important. Caring for children is a habit that cannot be separated from a woman's obligation. It is just a small example, but the meaning of all that means that women have a compassionate characteristic with sincere care and love for all the being context in the public interest, but so far women are considered mere compliments. Especially now that we live in the millennial era, information is very open, violent, harassment, and sexual exploitation, which is a form of violent crime that only affects an adult woman, but also women who are classified as minors or children. This tends to cause serious losses and consequences serious for the victim. The consequences that can be caused by sexual violence can have permanent and long-term physical and psychological impacts. Cases of sexual violence are currently being discussed hotly. This is due to the emergence of cases of sexual violence committed by Hollywood director Harvey Weinstein. This case occurred with the emergence of victims of sexual harassment from the director who told their story to the media, and it was later discovered that the victims of Harvey Weinstein's sexual assaults were mostly famous Hollywood actresses. With the re-emergence of the case, many other actresses have appeared in the media to tell their stories. This eventually led to a movement campaign on social media with the hashtag #MeToo. With the hashtag, many people came forward to tell their story, and others have gave support for the victims of sexual violence. Not only in another country, in our country, cases of sexual violence are still very common. Although people talk about cases of sexual violence in Indonesia, there are still few survivors who dare to come forward and tell their stories and raise their voices. This case is still widely discussed and still remembered in the case of 18 years old factory employee in Tangerang who was found completely naked with the handle of hose stuck in the genitals. This case became very big and made many people moved by inhumanity of these incidents. This case arose at the same time as the number of disclosures of case sexual violence occurred in Indonesia, along with the case of Yuyun, a 14 years old teenager who died as a result of being raped by 14 boys. Anyone can be a victim of perpetrator of sexual violence. For this reason, it's necessary to have a rules for the prevention and protection of acts violence as well as a comprehensive sexual education to prevent gender-based violence. Well, guys, the power of anti-violence solidarity today must continue to be built and campaigned. There are many number of factors that cause women victims of sexual violence to choose to remain silent. Among all other things, they consider the events they have experienced as a shameful disgrace that must be covered up. They have afraid of not be trusted and blamed, read about the negative consequences if they report them, adopting the illegal process. Gender inequality, abuse of power relation, and the lack of a human rights perspective and gender perspective that can be the problem. The root of the problem is still strong in the humanity, making cases of sexual violence against women more difficult to uncover, let alone be resolved. In fact, the mass media which should report victims to get the justice and recovery sometimes corner the victim. I got an example of new headline. Coming home from a nightclub, a student admits to being raped. Despite revealing the facts, the phrase going home from a nightclub is very detrimental to the victim, because that sentence leads the reader think that the student is natural to be raped because she is a bad girl. It is evident that she has just hang out at a nightclub. Likewise, mentions such as the victim wore revealing clothes or the victim was raped in the perpetrator's rooms suggest that the victims contributed to the incidents. Sexual violence has not been taken seriously, and if it's never taken seriously, many cases like this will continue to appear. One way to fight sexual violence is to raise our voices. We must stand up and move forward to continue to fight sexual violence. Don't be afraid to raise your voice, because if we don't tell our story, then things like will keep repeating itself and will happen to many people and would have happened to the people we care about. We must have the courage to fight back. The cases of sexual violence can decrease. It is not only women who must raise up against sexual violence, but men too. Because the victim of sexual violence are not only women, but also men. We must think of our sisters, our mothers, our friends, our children, and our loved one. We must unite and rise up to fight sexual violence. So thank you. I'm so grateful if you watch my speech. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.